Hello everyone, how are you doing? My name is Emily and I'm going to talk to you today about the most disappointing books I read in 2019. Strictly speaking, I would have filmed this and posted this back in January, but a lot of things got in the way. January was a very busy month. And I was churning out video after video, and I also got busy with my most recent Little Women video, which was a big project. So now I'm getting around to filming this video. It's not too late ever, I think, to roast a book. The books on this list, they range in the manner in which they disappointed me. Sometimes they weren't necessarily bad, but they didn't really meet my expectations, or they really just weren't for me. But sometimes they really were just bad, and I really did not like a lot of things about them. So let's get right to it. Let's talk about some books. The first disappointing book I read in 2019 was A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. This is the third book in her Court of Thorns and Roses series. I think I've addressed this in earlier videos, but I actually had read the first two books, Court of Thorns and Roses and Court of Mist and Fury, a couple years back. I remembered enjoying them, but to be fair, this was also a point in my life when I was not as critical when I was reading books. I was just getting back into reading again, and I was also just getting into YA. I'm back now. I had to charge my light, it went out. So I got back into this series again because I thought I should finish this series, and of course I thought I would enjoy it because I had enjoyed the first two books so much. And I read this book on ebook because I didn't like the narrator for the audiobook. And as it turns out, I don't actually like the writing of this book that much. The writing is so bad, and there are ellipses like crazy. I think every page must have at least 20 ellipses. It's like Sarah J. Maas is deliberately trying to stagger the narration of the book.
Also 20 per page? Who the fuck she thinks she has Chelsea Clinton?
Also, there's stupid fantasy concepts like the mating bond. So basically the mating bond is this thing where people get matched up to each other, and it's not really clear on why they are matched up or what factors into them getting matched up. They're just mates for life after they get mated in this mating bond. And I think literally a description of this is that, oh, well, sometimes the mating bond matches badly. And I was like, well, does that mean the mating bond is really a bad machine learning algorithm? You got the idea of what the mating bond is, right? It's stupid.
It's Tinder.
Yeah, it's basically Tinder.
If Tinder was more forceful and legally binding.
Yes, it's like Tinder if it were more forceful and legally binding. Now, Feyre and Rhysand. People are crazy about this couple. People think Rhysand is like their book boyfriend and stuff. And I'm just so sick of them in this book. They're just having sex all the time. They get like magic, their clothes off and stuff. And I'm just so bored of it. They're not interesting people. They are just tiresome characters. I was just so sick of them. And this book takes itself so seriously, but it doesn't work. It wants to be serious fantasy, but it just really isn't. It doesn't understand that about itself. There are no stakes in this book. Everyone who dies ends up coming back to life anyway. There's a character at the end who does die. The book acts like we're supposed to care about him dying, but this character was never really in the series until the last book, so I didn't care that he was dead. I think the most egregious thing I think the series does is that it never does anything interesting with fairies. In this series, fairies are basically overpowered human beings with wings and big dicks. You never get the sense that this is a different people with a different culture. Their world is just not that interesting. They're basically just humans who have powers and just run shops and bitch like everybody else. The only allusion to any sort of traditional fairy imagery is that this series bastardizes names of traditional Celtic fairies like the Morrigan. And those were the most interesting part of the story, but it never really went anywhere with them. So I think I just have to accept that Sarah J. Maas and we are not friends. I just don't get on with her writing that well. So I think I gave this 1.5 stars on Goodreads. I really did not enjoy this book. The next book on my list is The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert. So this book is about, oh, I even forgot what this book is even about. So this book is about a girl called Alice, and she and her mother have lived this very nomadic lifestyle. Her mother has been on the run, but then one day her mother disappears and Alice has to sort of peel back the mystery of her mother's backstory. It's all connected to this book called The Hazelwood, which is a collection of stories written by her grandmother. They're all stories about this mysterious fairy tale world. So the concept of this book is very interesting, but the first half is very, very dull. There's a lot of traveling to get to the place, to get to the next place. Really, I just wanted to get to the fairy tale bits of the story. I didn't really care for any of the characters. I wasn't even really into the main character's relationship with her mother. She always talked about how she was so angry all the time, but we didn't really get much about her motivations for this. We kept being told that the main character is angry and she's got anger management issues, but we never had this justified to us. I don't think we really had her dealing with that anger management issue, even when she went through this whole self-exploratory journey. And when you superficially address something like that, it just gets annoying after a while. So definitely the first half also raised way more questions than it answered, and I think it just dragged that out way too much. I think we should have had some answers given to us in the first half. Now, the book really picked up in the second half, and I really liked the writing and the world, but unfortunately that was not enough to compensate for what I went through in the first half. Basically, I would have liked this book way more if there were more fairy tale bits and better characters. I think I gave this 2.5 or 3 stars on Goodreads. It wasn't a terrible book, but definitely did not meet my expectations based on the premise. Third book on my list is The Surface Breaks by Louise O'Neill. Now, Louise O'Neill has made great strides in the YA community. She's known to be a very feminist author. So I was very excited to pick this up because this was supposed to be a feminist Little Mermaid. Of course, this cover is beautiful. And I also had it signed by her at Yalk, but I was really disappointed with this book. It seemed more interested in telling us about the lack of privilege of women rather than really showing us or demonstrating that to us. And I really don't like when themes like that are ham-fisted. I feel very talked down to when that happens. I think we've been told enough times that sexism is bad, so why can you not tell it to us with some nuance? And it all feels very disingenuous to call this a feminist novel when the main character basically spends the entire novel trying to get the attention of a male character who is ultimately not worth it. That being said, I did like some things about this book. This book set up a whole new mystery around the main character's mother. This was also a different take on the Sea Witch, which I hadn't seen before. But overall, when I finished it, I felt very about it. I just was very underwhelmed by this book. So the next book on my list is Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco. Oh boy, I could make a whole video about this book. So I already had low expectations going into this book. I'm like, okay, this is gonna be a fun read. I'm not gonna have high expectations about historical accuracy. I'm just gonna turn my brain off and it's gonna be fun. This is gonna be fine. But unfortunately, so many of the flaws of this book were just really in my face. So let me address the primary problem in this book, which I think many reviews on Goodreads have already touched on. This book is about a girl called Audrey Rose, who is an aristocrat living in London, and she gets involved with the Jack the Ripper murders. Of course, she's not like other girls because she apprentices with her uncle in his forensics lab. Audrey Rose is basically a modern girl in a Victorian world. She doesn't have any of the sensibilities of a Victorian girl, and she doesn't even have the sensibilities of a girl in the Victorian upper class. There is so much preaching about the disadvantages of women in this world, and yet Audrey Rose doesn't even feel that disadvantaged even for gentry. She has so much freedom. She can leave the house whenever she wants. She doesn't even need a chaperone when she goes out. Back in the day, if you were the daughter of aristocracy, you were handled with kid gloves. You had a set of eyes on you everywhere. And I think it would have been so interesting to watch her navigate the trappings of the upper class, like, you know, servants being around and watching you and reporting on you, and society having expectations of you. And that would have all been so interesting to see that impacting her world and having her navigate that in order to find her own freedom. And there are so many very egregious anachronisms. I'm not talking small anachronisms, I'm talking very major ones, like makeup, for instance. She's encouraged by a cousin to wear eye makeup, and she feels so empowered and bold when she goes out and sees people. Eye makeup is such such a no-no back in that day. You basically didn't wear eye makeup in the Victorian era unless you were a prostitute or an actress. And so much stuff just falls into Audrey Rose's lap. All she has to do to get her dad to back off is just stand up to him and say, I'm a big girl now. And back in the day, like, that would not happen. That would never be a thing. And of course, a lot of the mystery just proceeds because of conveniences. Like, all the evidence that she needs just falls into her lap right in front of her. And of course, her love interest, Thomas Cresswell, is a Sherlock ripoff, and he's mean to her, and I don't think he warrants that much discussion. And of course, the resolution was super predictable. I think the identity of Jack the Ripper is pretty obvious early on in the book. I won't give away who it is, but I invite you to read it and let me know how obvious it is, because I thought it was very obvious. Now, the last book on my list is The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton. So the thing about this book is that it's not a bad book necessarily. I really just didn't love it like I wanted to. Basically, it's about several people who come together in New Zealand during the gold rush, and they are all connected by a very complicated set of circumstances surrounding stolen gold, a prostitute, and the gold being stolen and being passed from hand to hand. So this book sets up a very intricate mystery, and that's not a bad thing necessarily. But the thing is, when you have a large cast of characters like this and none of them are that compelling, then you can't follow the mystery that well. Basically, I just wasn't invested enough in any singular person to be interested in the mystery. I feel like so much of my reading of this book was spent checking what had happened and what the chain of events was. I think a little something was just missing from this book for me. I mean, I really wanted to like it. I wanted to be invested in it. I really do have to praise its writing and intricate setup. I mean, Eleanor Catton does amazing descriptions, but it was missing a little bit of heart and spice, which I would have needed to get through a tome, a really complicated tome like this. So that's it for the most disappointing books I read in 2019. Let me know down below if there are any books that really disappointed you recently or in the last year. In the meantime, you can follow me on Goodreads and Twitter and Instagram, and I will see you in my next video.